Thank you for attending tonight and being interested and invested in all of our plans and the future of Pendleton. Before we go much further, I want to introduce the members of our team that are here tonight. Scott Resky, Hannah Rose Urbanski, Denise McKee is in the back somewhere. Stephanie Buck is running Zoom. Jim Cook is in the back. And then town council members, we've got Chet Babb, Steve Denny, and Shane Davis hiding in the back. My name is Marissa Skaggs. I'm the president of the Pendleton Town Council. And so just thank you again for being here tonight. I'm going to give this one more click and hope.
Maybe we can exit out and go back.
Can you go to the next slide, Steph? Oh, there we go. There we are. Okay, one more. There we go. As you can see tonight, we are here at this April 11th meeting. We're also going to have a public input session on May the 17th. The purpose of tonight is to inform you about our plans and our guiding documents, as well as give you guys time to digest those and then come back here in a couple of weeks for the public feedback session. There will be some time at the end of this session for question and answer, but really that May 17th session is going to be all question and answer. So mark that on your calendars, tell your neighbors to come if they have remaining questions that aren't addressed in the presentation. Next slide. As you listen tonight, we hope that you have these three takeaways kind of sit in your head and think about them. Growth is going to happen. We can protect the town through our planning, and we're not growing just for the sake of growth. Those are three guiding things that we hope that take hold with you tonight. In order to understand where we're going, we need to understand where we are. And so to do that is Town Manager Scott Resky.
All right, thanks, Marissa. I'm the town manager, as Marissa said. I've been at the job just short of 3 years. So with the lasers working, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So first we need to figure out what's going to happen, right? So we want to know where we're at now, where we're going to go. So let's start with this little number here. I'm sure everybody's focused on the big number, but let's start at this one. So that's where we were at the 2020 census, 4717. Anybody have any guess that now it's 2023 where we think we are? It's a scientific guess, but anybody guess where we're at already? 5,400, good. That's a good one. Anybody else? We think we're approaching 6,000. So anyway, so the next number we're going to look at is what is our potential population? So that's 40,000. So how do we know that it's going to be 40,000? We'll get that a map here in a second, but basically we looked at the town boundaries, how much undeveloped area we have within the town boundaries, and then use the normal density that planning department allows for development to happen, and then we just extracted that out. So that's our potential population. The other thing to keep in mind is that Ingalls, LaPel, and the unincorporated areas, Fall Creek Township, Green Township, Adams Township, Stony Creek up in LaPel, they're going to be experiencing the same thing. Maybe LaPel and Ingalls starts to feel that growth faster than we do just because they're closest to Indianapolis. But basically, it's not just us, it's our neighbors too. And just so you know, a little trivia, the town is about 13 square miles. Next slide. Oh, don't tell me. Oh, thank you. Okay, so what don't we know? We do know where we're at now, where we're going to end up, right? We don't know how fast we're going to grow. So how long is it going to take us to get there? It could be 10 years, it could be 20, it could be 50, right? We know it's coming. We just don't know how fast it will happen. A lot of that is dependent on the economy and other factors. The other thing is, you'll see it here on the map, we don't know which areas will develop first. You know, that's dependent more on the property owners, the developers, you know, which farmer is ready to give up farming and he wants to sell the ground, and so he sells to a developer. We don't know how that's really going to go. So those are the two questions: how fast and what parts are going to grow first. So here's the map of current boundaries. All right. So here's Pendleton, a little bit of a donut hole in an area that didn't want to annex a few years back. The purple down here is Ingalls, sort of odd shape. It's horseshoe shape. Here's LaPel. LaPel is quite large. They're sort of similar to this part of Pendleton as far as a lot of empty farm ground. Then you've got the big monster here, Anderson. You can see where it started to creep into Fall Creek. It's creeping into Adams Township, and they're sneaking a little bit over there into Union Township. So Markville down here, this pink up there, that is not Ingles. They're not doing an end run. That is Country Farms.
Country Club Heights.
Heights, and maybe part of that. So one thing too, oh wait, let me go back. This, the red lines are the township boundaries. Okay. Oh, the one thing I want to point out on the map, one thing that's really important is that there is an aquifer that runs about like this. And our new water treatment plant is at the end of it on 900 South, and it's got 7 wells. Anderson is looking to tap into that aquifer up here. So you probably have heard some rumors that Anderson is looking for more ground in Fall Creek Township. And so they've been looking for places to place their wells outside the city and in this area. Aquifer is an underground lake. They're usually pretty deep. It's usually commercial wells or public wells go down that deep. Yeah, it's like a cave underground. It stores a vast amount of water. Good question. All right, next slide. So this is a planning and zoning map. It's all different colors, and we go crazy. We'd be here all night to talk about the different zones. So just to get you orientated, this is I-69, of course, State Road 38 coming through town. Here's where we're at right now in the old town. High school and junior high around here off of 300 West. So to make it easier, we consolidated basically down, if we go to the next slide, greens and grays. Grays are areas that have already developed. The green, which is mostly here on the west side of I-69, that is vastly undeveloped. And then, but over here on the east side, did I say it backwards? This is west side, the east side, there's a lot of green area left to develop within the town boundaries. All right, so that's where we're going to see it. Now to look at how fast we can grow, let's look at a couple of towns that we're familiar with. McCordsville, they're sort of like us. Instead of off of I-69, they're just off of 70. They're on 67 like we are. Zionsville is sort of like us. They've got a historic downtown that they're all interested in protecting. And then Fishers, which is just down 69, who is, Eagles and Pendleton would be the next concentric circle out from Fishers. So let's look at those in a little bit closer. Next. So this is McCordsville. So pretty sleepy, right? 1980s, and then 2000, they were just 1,100. And then they all of a sudden they started growing. They quadrupled and then they doubled. So you can see that trajectory there. Once it's going to take off, it's going to take off for them. And that trajectory will continue to happen. Next slide, please. Zionsville, same thing, sort of sleepy. Then all of a sudden the growth started to hit, right? Every 10 years up here to their 2020 census. Some of this may be they merged with their township to protect the historic downtown. Next slide. In Fishers, so when I graduated high school right around here, it was only 2,000 people. It was like a gas station and 2 liquor stores. And then all of a sudden in 1990, they were at 7,500. And this is the line. This 10-year jump is what keeps me up at night. Because remember, we said we were around 6,000. They were at 7,000. And all of a sudden, in 10 years, they were 37,000. Then they doubled for the next census. And then just this census, they're over 100,000, but at the census, short of 100,000. So the main point, if you go back through all these slides, once the growth starts, it doesn't stop. Okay, next slide. So what are some of the potential pitfalls of rapid growth? First, So one of the first things you see with growth or heavy growth is loss of identity and history. There's a lot of small towns in Marion County that you've never heard of that used to be vibrant towns, just like we were outside of Indianapolis, but just outside of Indianapolis. Now they're just swallowed up by Indianapolis and Marion County. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind, is to protect your identity and history, so you feel like you live in Pendleton. Then you have traffic condition or congestion. I'm not gonna say much about that. We all know what that feels like. Monotonous neighborhoods, if you're not careful with rapid growth, if you have a lot of rapid growth happening at the same time, they end up having houses that look very familiar really quickly. Strains on infrastructure, not only trying to keep new infrastructure up with growth, but you're adding new infrastructure to old infrastructure, like you're adding more new water pipes to old pipes. Never works out well. When I was getting a master's in public administration, they beat this into our heads all the time. No matter how good you are, revenue is always going to lag the demand for the public services. Displaced businesses, this is one thing I'm concerned about. A lot of your favorite mom and pop places, restaurants, that sort of thing, people you're used to dealing with here in a small town. Sometimes they get displaced when the chains start, chain stores and chain restaurants start coming in. You know, what they look for is not so much the population growth to locate something that's a large chain. They look at for the rate of growth. Social disconnect, not only physically, when you start to feel disconnected, because the way, you know, you cut through somebody's backyard and through the alley, well, all of a sudden those might not be there anymore. If you're not keeping up with trails. The other thing is, all of a sudden the neighbors they're used to knowing since elementary school or high school, or all of a sudden you don't recognize their faces anymore. So you can start to feel disconnected. Municipal debt, that's tied to the revenue. What happens is when rapid growth happens, and you're a small town like us, and we feel like we need to build some infrastructure to keep up with the growth, it doesn't take much to go into debt. And so you have to be very careful about that. And we'll talk about some of the ways to protect against that. Water supply burdens, this is starting to be an issue here. More and more people are coming to me and saying, look, I just live outside the town. My well is drying up. They say I gotta go deeper. And that's happening because as more people move into the township area too, you're competing for the same water. And then stress on public safety. When you're growing a police department really fast, it's hard to have an experienced police department if you're adding so many people every year. It's going to eventually feel like half your police department are rookies. And then same with the fire side, constantly keeping up with getting new equipment, keep up with the more and more homes and buildings going up. Okay, so we have 3 strategies that we look at. We'll go into each one of these in detail, but the first one is how do we help protect ourselves from this growth. One is enhance the quality of life, take advantage of it, of the growth, but use that to enhance the quality of life, not just stay where we're at. Stay ahead of the growth, all right, and then protect the town from debt. So we'll go into those in details. So for quality of life, is first protect Pendleton's identity and preserve the historic nature. Next is invest in the quality of place. Just because you're trying to keep up with infrastructure, don't forget to do the nice things too. The other one is economic development is always focused on the quality of life, not on the quantity. So in other words, you want to bring things into the town that enhance the quality, but don't bring the quantity. So in other words, a good example is don't focus on bringing somebody in just because they're going to add jobs, right? Are they going to add quality to the town? Expand the park system and then safeguard property values. We don't want people who have lived here a long time to all of a sudden be paying the price for development. They didn't want it. They lived here 10 years, 40 years. And we can talk a little bit more about that here in a second too. So if we go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So how do we stay ahead of the growth? Well, first of all, don't deny that growth is going to happen. That's sort of what we're doing here today. And then constantly plan, and then plan together as a community. We're always looking for citizen input at every level of town government. We have committees that have been involved in master thoroughfare planning, our impact fees, those sorts of things. Learn from other communities, sort of touched on that when we had McCordsville, Zionsville, and Fishers up there. And then adapt and adjust plans as necessary. You know, we all know Peyton Manning was a great passer, great physical football player, great quarterback, but one of his greatest skills that everybody says that made him the greatest of all times in some courts is the fact he could go up to the line and adjust. And when he would do that famous Omaha, which is, oh no, the defense is shifted on us. Here's the new plan, right? So strategy number 3, how do we protect the town from debt? Have development pay its way, not the people that already live here. Maximize the use of grants and alternative fundings. And then whenever we do a project, it's going to improve more than just one thing. Classic, we had a stormwater problem on Water Street, but now if you look at it, it looks like a brand new rebuilt street, nice sidewalks, better connection between the soccer fields and the playground. It's got to have multiple community benefits. And also, and this is sort of a strict rule I came in when I was became town manager, we're not going to do a project unless we're going to have multiple funding sources. Okay. So how do we know if we're being successful? If as this growth happens, does Pendleton still feel like Pendleton is? Okay. So those are the strategies. Now, Anna Rose is going to talk about some of the tools that we put in place through ordinances and other means to help control that growth. So Hannah.
I guess I don't need this. Broken clicker. All right. So next slide, please. So I'm going to be going through the tools that the town has in place for strategically steering growth. If you can't see this, it is also on that brochure paper that you have. So you can follow along that way. This slide and the next slide are both on that paper, if you can't see it. So the first tool that we have is our Unified Development Ordinance, otherwise known as our UDO. This is our #1 go-to document for everything, anything from a fence to a factory, as we say. So it controls aspects such as like architecture, density, permitted uses, landscaping. I mean, you name it, it's in there. So it's also a living document, meaning that we adapt it to new best practices. So new Indiana code that comes out or a new methodology for doing things, we'll adapt that into that document. We can also amend things that are not working, and we can add to things that are working. So it's very tailor-made to your specific jurisdiction. So we are constantly assessing that document to make sure it works well and perpetually strengthen the UDO. So next we have our comp plan, and that guides our comprehensive master plan, excuse me. That guides what type of development should go where. And then our I-69 interchange master plan is basically an appendage of that document. And it creates an in-depth development guide around the interchange and is proactive at mitigating any negative effects to our existing downtown. Next, we have our access management and control ordinance. This is for safe entrance and exits, basically where your driveway cuts can go, how big they can be, what materials they have to be made of, etc. Next, to kind of go hand in hand with that, are our street standards. So this talks about roadway widths and pedestrian features required for all new developments. Again, speaks to materials that must be used, the widths that roadways have to be, and what their classifications are. Our thoroughfare plan works hand in hand with our street standards as far as required features and classifications. It works for future roadway expansion and creation. So the bike and ped plan, that one's pretty self-explanatory. We're always looking at ways to have multimodal connectivity. whether it's, asphalt trails or something like that. Always looking to connect people. So next we have our historic preservation design guidelines. These are really important for our Historic Preservation Commission. That's kind of their version of the UDO. It's their go-to document, and it's used to preserve our historic fabric in our downtown, in our local registered historic district. So next we have our road impact fee plan that's used for roadway creation for traffic mitigation due to incoming development. So you have a subdivision come in, or you have, a Starbucks come in, you're gonna have a lot of extra traffic on the road and possibly people living here who work in those places. So you need to improve your roadways and your choke points, and that's what we use those fees for. The park impact fee plan creates and maintains a level of service for the park. And then our Parks and Rec master plan is future uses and expansion in the park system. Next, thank you. So how are we addressing these potential pitfalls that come with development? So earlier in the presentation, I know Scott talked about these potential pitfalls. So this graphic represents those potential issues on the top row and in the green. And then on the left, you'll see the tools that the town has in place to mitigate those. So for example, traffic congestion, we have access management control, street standards, thoroughfare plan, and roadway impact fees that help mitigate those problems. So overall, the tools that we have in place have us really, really well prepared for the growth that is coming. Because like Scott said, we can't deny that growth is going to happen. So we're just trying to be best prepared for it. Next. So in conclusion, again, our final takeaways that we mentioned at the top, growth is going to happen. We can protect the town through our planning, the ordinances, the codes, the plans that we do have in place, and we're not growing just for the sake of growth. So before we get into Q&A, this is myself and the assistant planner's contact information. You can take a picture of it, give us a call, shoot us an email. Our cards are up on the sign-in table as well. Or you can come to one of our planning commission meetings. They typically have items every month. If they don't, those are canceled, but they're the first Wednesday at 7. They're also available via Zoom. Next. And then just to wrap up, our next session will be public feedback only. We're not going to have a presentation with that one. That's on Wednesday, May 17th here at Town Hall at 6:30. And again, is available via Zoom. So that's all we've got. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you for coming out. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have. So forth. Yeah.
The reason why myself, my wife, and my neighbors also probably came here is because we're concerned with the Anderson wanting to take over part of Fall Creek, because that's where we live.
Mhm.
And we really don't want that. Really don't want that. They tried to annex our neighborhood before, our last time, and we wanted to say it again, because we did not want to be part of Anderson at all.
As well.
Okay.
So that's.
That.
Well, so I'm getting that question a lot. And some of it is, the first question I ever got was actually about a problem with a well. Question came to me and said, hey, what do we do? We'd like to get annexed into the town because we're starting to have well problems. Or can we get Pendleton water out to where we live to help solve that? Because the experts are telling me I've got to go an extra 100 feet because more people are starting to pour.
My neighborhood? Oh,
No, this is just out in the unincorporated area, right? So, so we get those questions. Then I get a lot of questions like, hey, have you ever thought about merging with the township? Because we're afraid Anderson's going to keep coming south. And we don't want to be Anderson. And we hope tonight we show that we have stricter standards and the more than what the county has, more than what Anderson has, because they want to protect their rural living. And the county standards are a lot looser, mostly because remember their standards are for the whole county, all the way up to Elwood. And so they have to be more generic. Ours could be more specific because for instance, our historic downtown, we have very strict rules about if you have a historic building within the district that you have to protect that building. So we're starting to, people are starting to come up to us and ask me that question, are you going to merge with the township? Yorktown did it 20 years ago. It passed like 90 to 10. They did it to protect themselves against Muncie from coming down. Zionsville did it to protect their downtown nature, right? If they merged with the townships that surrounded them, then they could create that buffer because their downtown, like ours, is so small, and they felt if all of a sudden they're surrounded by vinyl villages, the historic downtown would just be shadowed by the vinyl villages. So we are getting that question a lot.
So that is what's happening. Anderson is trying to take.
So
That's what.
Yeah.
I guess what I.
So-
feel leaning towards with the same question is, do we have an option? Like, if we don't get annexed in with Pendleton, because I live like 3 houses down from you. I see our kids playing all the time. I love your voice. If we don't get pulled into if we don't get pulled into you, do we have to annex into Anderson? That's what we're trying to, I think we're all trying to prevent, like.
Protect ourselves.
We want to
Yeah.
protect ourselves. Is there a way to prevent us from being annexed in? I think is what you.
So, good question. So, as some of you know, I was a state legislator for 11 years. 11 years, I saw the annex laws change back and forth. Currently, it's swung the other way, where you can only be annexed if you agree to do it. Like,
How many people does it take to agree to do
There's a
it?
75% threshold, and then there's 100% super voluntary threshold, correct?
Yes.
We sign a petition to. They would, I imagine they would have, oh.
I'm talking about
Independent. to keep us
So
from
there's
being
a
part of the-
contiguous feature where we have to have bordering property. And so where you're at, or where are you guys?
Fall-
Fall
Fall
Creek
Creek
Heights.
Heights.
That's a ways off.
Yeah, it's not, we're not
Yeah.
close.
We'd have to.
We are closer to Anderson, but we just don't want to be part of
We're
Anderson.
also already a part of the school district, and I
Right.
think I can speak for all of the neighbors that we don't want to go
Yeah,
here.
because it's just gonna make our property values go down.
Sure.
It's gonna make our property taxes go up. And then we're gonna be on Anderson City Schools, which we don't want.
Yeah.
We don't want any of this.
So the current, this is actually under, back a few years ago, about a decade and a half. They changed it so it's real easy for cities and towns to merge with townships or townships to merge. And this is how the process works. Pendleton Town Council, let's pretend like we're Fall Creek and Pendleton are gonna merge, right? So the way the process would happen is the town council would agree to start the process. The township board of trustees would agree to start the process. And then you have basically a committee or committees that come together and they create a plan. Like, how are you gonna transition the police department? How are you gonna transition the fire department? What are you gonna do with your water? What are you gonna do with your electric? And they come up with a plan, and then that is presented at the next election in a referendum. And it's voted yes or no. If it's voted yes, so 50% plus one person says yes, then the new boundaries would look like this. Anderson would still stay Anderson, but this would be the new boundaries, down to the township, down to the county line, and then up, and then over into the green. So even though the town and the township are merging, don't forget part of this is still in Green Township. That would still stay part of the town. So that's how the process works. One of the things that I like your question because it's important. So one of the things that could happen to you, even though you don't want the annexation to happen and you're able to block Anderson, one of the things that happens is a farmer sells 60 acres, 100 acres, and wants to have it developed. The developer buys it. He goes to the city of Anderson and goes, I need water. They're real close. Anderson says, okay, here's the deal. You get water if you agree to be annexed. Developer, he doesn't care, right? He doesn't live here. So he goes, okay, and so that creates a domino effect. So even if your little pocket stays unincorporated, you're surrounded by Vinyl Villages and Anderson. And so you end up with the same consequence, what you were talking about, low property values, that sort of thing happens. So even though your particular parcel might not get annexed, you could easily be surrounded on 3 sides, 4 sides, in theory, by Anderson.
I wouldn't mind that. It's just long. I don't mind that as much.
Well-
You make it sound so dreary, but I mean, it could be worse. As long as we're not part of that, I don't care.
So my question is like, I don't want our neighborhood to be a part of it, but if you're talking about how Anderson is trying to tap into the top part of that aquifer, if we would, our housing addition, even though we are in a flood zone and it does flood at times, we would still potentially be losing our well stuff if they tap up towards us, correct? I know. But I'm just kind of getting to that kind of where you're talking about, like, they're trying to get that top part of the aquifer, is that kind of?
I think- I
This
think
is
what,
just your opinion on it.
yeah, but I can tell you what's happened. So they have literally been making offers to some of the farmers up there for the wells. I
Yeah.
think a lot of you have heard that. And then what I think will happen, because right now the annex laws are in favor of people not, if they don't want to be annexed, it's in your favor. But what happens is you get the same effect. If you're surrounded, like these people a couple of years ago decided not to annex. Do you think they're still Pendleton? Do you think it's still Pendleton community? Yes, right? What's gonna happen if you have a donut hole right here of unincorporated area and Anderson's all the way down here? So yeah, that's gonna be the effect, even though your parcel doesn't. That's the only easy way to,
They have water over at Menards and that where Anderson,
where at,
Menards, Menards.
that's part of the same aquifer.
Yeah, so when
Yeah.
they run back to the airport,
Yeah,
they were gonna pipe.
right. It's, I forget exactly where it runs, but it runs like this. And the depth is 300, 700 feet. I've got to go back through. I looked at the water study a few months ago. I forget what the depth was.
Does Pendleton have a plan to work on Creek Township?
Well, it's sort of, if people want to do it, you know.
We're all here saying.
We're all voting tonight, we're good. Like how many-
Back down to your growth is going.
growth is gonna
Include us in it because we already feel like we're a part of your community.
happen. Yeah, you
Well,
feel
but
like,
what effect would it have on us? Would it change, how much would it change my property taxes?
so
Well, we are-
that's a very interesting question. I actually know
I
sort
know, I
of the
just want to
answer.
know what effects. it
Right.
So because of the fire territory, they just did a parcel by parcel study on when they created the fire territory, and what would happen. And from that study, we do know that, well, the rate between Pendleton and the unincorporated area, Pendleton is, property tax rate is about 15%. But what had happened with 85% of the residential properties is that they were hitting the tax cap anyway, so they would see no change. So even though Pendleton's higher, in the unincorporated area, you're hitting the tax cap before that extra 15%. So might not be true for your particular parcel, but for 85% in that study, we found that to be true. And one of the things that would happen if we continue to move forward is we would do a study to see what that would look like, and that would be part of the process.
And that would be parcel by parcel
It would
also.
be
So we
parcel by
would,
parcel.
you would have an idea.
And that's part of the circuit breakers.
The circuit breakers kicking in.
Why won't be incorporated in fuel? How much does it cost that water?
So what we would do with water is there's two things that'll drive the water. First, if that area is in a situation where the wells are just drying it up, it's just out of necessity, right?
You just need water.
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah. The other thing is what we'll do is remember what the strategy we put up there about growth has to pay for itself. Well, as developers come in, we will make them buy the water main or put in the water main, so they're paying for it, and then we would catch everybody in between. Indiana has a very popular law that allows the developers to get reimbursed for that main over time, but essentially up front we would have to pay it. So if you're in an area that has growth, right, and it's got a lot of development going on, that means there's probably going to be a main run out your way, which means if there's a lot of growth and they're tapping in your wells, well, that's, you now have a water main to tap into. So that's the way you would do that to keep everybody from the town from going into debt. You make the developers pay for the maintenance.
Are you wanting, you meaning town, are you wanting to keep us? Or are you wanting to throw us out?
I grew up.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
Nobody right now.
I'm in favor of the merger as a town manager. You know, it may be a little bit of a pain, but I think it's absolutely worth because
when we have your support, I guess, is why you keep
Yeah.
saying, well, if you want to do it, or if we
Yeah.
have people who want to do it,
Yeah.
we're asking for your
The
help
town
and
can't
guidance
solicit.
on how to do it.
We can't
We're
go
gonna
and
get
solicit.
caught one way or the other. We're either going to put it
Exactly.
Anderson or Pendleton.
I just want to know if we've got your support, if we're all on the same team.
I think we have no, this is me talking, not the town council.
I
So
understand.
they could answer. I think I'm a civil engineer, got a master's in public administration. We have no choice between the water issue and the reality is, and I've seen it, I was in the civil engineering business for 20 years, all over the state. I've seen towns make mistakes when it comes to this issue. So the thing to keep in mind is they're going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to grow. Nobody's paying attention. Greenfield's going to come right up 9.
It already
Eagles,
is.
yeah, Eagles is gonna fill in. They've been looking for water right in this area, right? Same aquifer. So in fact, they've got a well right,
It's by the
Right here.
reformatory.
yeah. by
Across the street.
Fullerton.
Yeah.
So they're already knocking on the door. I don't think we have a choice.
We'll be
This
your
is
board.
this is Pendleton, but this is Pendleton community.
Yes.
So
And you're already with us on our parks and recreation and in our fire
Exactly.
territory.
School.
And our
And
school.
school.
Right.
and the sewer district. So
Yeah.
it's,
And we're on all 3 ways.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
Now, when you said 50% would have to vote for that on referendum, 50% of who?
voters, so registered
You mean,
voters.
you know,
the
in-
county?
In Madison County?
No. Just, it would be people who live in Pendleton, including the people in the Green Township area, and everybody in the unincorporated
So
area.
we were gonna vote too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Mhm.
you can
Yeah.
vote on it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've been up there over 30 years. I've seen Anderson, probably 60th Street.
Mhm.
No problem. All the way over in the orange area, just over that
Yeah.
area, up here from the air. It's- you kinda wonder, this way or-
If we gotta do all this to join you, how easy is it for them just to take us? That
It has to be
makes sense.
voluntary.
So one
They
thing
can't.
about this merger, is we're joining each other,
Okay.
right?
You can't
It's
just
not,
take us.
it's not, yeah, it's not,
No.
you know, we're saying, oh, come on, Lord. No,
Yeah,
it's
but
like, we're joining.
They would have to do a similar referendum to annex us, right? Where everybody in their municipality and unincorporated areas would have to vote on it as well, right?
So right now, the laws, if they went to your house and said, we want to annex your house, you can turn it into basically.
They can't
I can
eminent
just say,
domain.
you take
though.
everywhere around me but me.
Well, it
We
depends
have-
what the,
We
it
have
depends how many parcels they're going after, truthfully, right? Cause it's 75, no,
I
okay.
think if they go and they ask and you say no, then you don't have to.
But
But
I
if-
will tell you this, even if you hated me when I was a legislator, trust me on this one, it will swing back the other way. Because in 11 years, it swing at 3 different annexation strategies, and it would swing back and forth. So if you're looking ahead, not just in months and years, but you know, what is it gonna be like for 10 years? You could easily have it swing back, and the next thing you're you're stuck, you're coming into Anderson, right? So, the thing to do is, I feel this is why this is inevitable, is you gotta protect yourself. It's inevitable because of the water, it's inevitable, it's the people I grew up with. I graduated in 78, Pendleton. You know, this is the Pendleton community. I would say a lot of this area thinks are Pendleton. Parkerville, yeah, but anyway. So.
What
Yes, sir.
about,
Because I worry about the water, we live out in Hickory Hills, and I worry about it because there's so many wells in our area, they're all gotta be about the same depth. And at some point, we're not down where the town is, and I don't pay to go 300 feet down to get there, because it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
But I just moved back, I grew up here, and I've been gone for about 15 years to come back. And through this whole time, Anderson's whole goal has come south because they're dying.
Yeah.
And the interstate's gonna grow. So remember, they tried to get the airport down here to try to get to exit 14. They're blocked now. They can't go that way. So they're gonna come down 109. It only makes sense because that's where the
Yeah.
money's gonna be. And they're gonna want to be a part of that. And so that's my concerns. And I'm on the Fall Creek Township Advisory Board. And I look at it, I'm thinking, what's best for all of us at some point? And I think this group, even though we may not always agree with them, you're gonna be able to come in here and have dialogue with them. Any of us up in that area that gets annexed in Anderson, they're not gonna care about us.
Corporate growth.
What's that?
Factors around this area.
No. So remember I talked about quality of life. So our economic development is not to attract jobs. It's not our strategy. It's not to attract commercial, just so town government has more property tax revenue. Our theory is if it doesn't add to the quality of life, in other words, make it a nice place to live, then if it doesn't enhance that, we're gonna turn it away. We're because we can do that. Some towns, like, let's just talk about McCordsville. That town is in controversy right now because they built all the warehouses out there by 70. And everybody who lives out towards 67 is miserable because of all the semis and everything like that. So the town, yes, they got more revenue. However, they paid the price in quality of life. Because we own our own utilities, which is always a good thing, the town is very financially sound, and we don't need to go after things just to create jobs or to generate property tax revenue. And we've been pretty good, right, Hannah, in discouraging and turning away businesses that don't add to the quality of life. But the most powerful thing is the citizens that serve on the planning commission and the BZA, man, they are all about it too. In fact, I would say they're even harder than we are.
Yeah.
They are like, if it's not quality of life, we don't want it. They've turned down a couple things that probably somebody you know about here recently.
Scott, I think the other thing you ought to mention is, because in first quarter of 2025, 73rd Street is going to be extended from up there at Nestle, and you might show on the map where that's going to go.
I read about that.
You don't think Anderson's going to want to come down that way and get that upper quadrant because it's tax money? Because those Nestle and those places, I was on the school board, that's in our school district. And they gave all that tax money away because the governing body can make it a tip or exempt them from property tax or whatever. So the school doesn't, even though it's in our district, we don't enjoy any of that revenue at the school. And probably never will because it's an Anderson.
Storage warehouse or something there. Next to Nestle.
You're at a large parking area for
Yeah.
something like that.
That's off 700, right? No, by Nestle they're at. Oh, by
So
Nestle.
tell on Mike, he's one of the guys that voted on it because he's on the board, the township board.
I mean, I'd listen to our constituents. If that's what you guys wanted to do, I'd be for it. I mean, I wouldn't just look out for my own interest. But I think it's the right thing because I think it protects everybody, but that Doesn't mean everybody's gonna agree.
The Pendleton, it may not be jobs or factories, but it's still its resources to it, which is the water. It's the gas, right? It's those things that. Really get that up to.
No, never
No,
sell your
never
utilities.
sell.
There's a
ever.
lot of towns, Lawrence is a good example. They sold their utilities. It's like selling. Then the utilities, your own utilities, always, you're reinvesting into the community. It's always the best way to go.
I think this is an option, it sounds like you're not trying to go for adding tons of factories. I actually don't mind being on the well. I enjoy my well.
Yeah, me too. I like
So
that bigger one.
does that mean that if we were to stay in, we get to keep our well?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
you
good.
don't,
It's just,
Right.
if our wells run dry.
You've got
Right.
a choice now.
Then that would make sense.
Right, you have a choice.
yeah, Indiana water laws are pretty loose. Electric is totally different. You have to have a territory set by
Right.
IURC. Water, you don't have to have utilities. That's why Anderson can come down or Anderson can go up. I mean, Pendleton can go up. With water utilities outside their town boundaries.
Right.
You could have three water companies on the same street and half of the people on wells.
When is, if there's any, I mean, what is the
Next step.
atmosphere or the feeling of letting more restaurants get developed along I-69 corridor? And, I mean, I hear we're gonna get Wolfies or something like that. We'd like more, but I guess some people want less. And my other question was, if the population grows, isn't there something about if you get over 5,000, then we lose
The match,
matching grant?
The
of
community crossings
national-
match, right? Does that still exist? It existed in
Yeah.
2018 when we were annexed.
Right.
That's why they're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
community
so there are
crossings.
some, if we move over 5,000, then but
Yeah.
we're really there. The next census would be there.
Once it go from 75, 50-50 to 75-25.
It changes there. Grants and stuff are different, but yeah, we'll lose
The rural designation.
the rural designation.
And we did max out our $1 million last year in community crossings grant money. So we have a very good grant writing team here for that grant specifically. We always apply. We didn't apply this last round, but we plan to apply in the next one. So
The next census will be.
Yeah.
No matter what. We're already there. So,
What about restaurants?
okay,
go back to
so,
the zoning.
yeah, the zoning, or else, well, we could talk about the quadrant.
We don't have that.
Yeah, just go to the zoning map.
So out here in this specific, yeah, go back to
The,
the.
the,
quadrant.
the pretty one. There
So
you
in
go.
this area here, we hired a consultant to do the planning just here, right? And because that could be very touchy, one of the things we wanted to protect against was there being two downtowns, like if this developed too fast, we have two downtowns and that would hurt the old downtown. But there are areas that are designated for restaurants and that sort of thing. You
Yeah,
wanna talk
light
about that a little
commercial. So anything in red can have a restaurant in it, in theory. So that's just our basic general business designation. I mean, we're not discouraging restaurant style. I think to Scott's point, it's more things that don't necessarily add quality of life, like they're just here for, factories, yeah, warehouse, storage type things. But in that I-69 plan, and all of our plans are on our website, so you're welcome to review them. They have kind of breakdowns of what should go in those quadrants. And definitely restaurants and entertainment is part of that. But it's a different feel. It's meant to be a different type of experience than if you're downtown.
What is this isolated red square there?
Right here.
Right here. Why would that be red? Down low farmland?
Oh, this
That's
is,
the
is that
community
a
wellness
business
center.
park? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is I think that's Community Wellness Center. This-
Oh,
So this is the town's industrial park. A lot of that ground we still own. And
and
we're,
is there gonna be a
we're
water
being,
park like that?
yeah, so we've got a federal grant to connect this, come down to the bridge where it used to be back this old timers where Taylor Street is, cross over, and then come to the downtown and then into the park. The other part is that we're looking at coming up in around.
The mobile home park.
Yeah, crossing over maybe at Franklin and Adams.
But a
Bring it-
water park, is that
I
what you?
thought somebody said.
Oh, the aquatic center.
What are you talking about?
So
A business
pool-
park trail. It's a
Oh, I'd
trail.
love to hear about that too.
So, was your, I'm sorry, was your
I
question about
originally
the
was asking
aquatic
if there's
center?
gonna be like a fun aquatics like sliding.
Oh,
board
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
kids, things.
right.
Yeah.
So the high school pool and the brown pool, they're both 40 and 50 years old. They've hit the end of their life, so we've got to find another option. So we were exploring building an aquatic center right next to community sports and wellness. The town owns it. So unfortunately, right now we're getting a sticker shock. It's pretty
Wow.
shocking.
It's just a cool 85 million.
Oh.
That ain't right.
We're not gonna go
We're not gonna go there.
there. We'll figure out another option.
Then what were you talking about the trails?
Then the trail,
Yeah.
right, is, we've got a federal grant to design a trail that somehow has to loop, but basically, we have the grounds to bring it down, cross at Fall Creek where Taylor Street ends.
Mhm. We're
Need a
using a
sewer
historic bridge
The
as well.
historic bridge will be put
Yeah.
up, and it'll be connected to the downtown and the park. And then we're also looking at coming in from going north with it too.
And is that a paved trail or? just
Mhm.
dirt?
Yeah, it
Would
would
be
be 10-foot wide asphalt. And also any of the bridges on it would be ADA compliant as well. And right now, we're just in preliminary engineering. So we're basically, with those funds we got from the federal government, looking to make shelf-ready plans. And then typically, once you get funding from them for preliminary engineering, they'll give you money for construction. But it is kind of a match type of thing. I think it's usually 80-20, right? Yeah.
Which way?
20% of.
20% us.
Okay.
Yeah. no.
Much of a deal.
And-
That would not be a deal at all,
And
no.
is that expiration date on that grant?
It's not a grant, it's just awarded monies. So we didn't have to like apply for it. There's an entity called MCOG, and they get money funneled from the federal government to them, and then they distribute it. So you kind of, I guess, write up a project that you want to do, and they work with you on it, and then figure out what kind of monies they can give you.
So we have as long as we want to get that done.
Yeah, it's not going to expire.
Did you want to share the?
If you want to show the project plan, it's there.
So here's the quadrant plan, a graphic. Of course, there's written words go with it. It's about that thick.
Yeah.
But here's I-69. And then these have different areas of how they would develop.
I don't know if you
Yeah, yeah, hold it there. There you go. That's better.
But the key is the Keystone area.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna let that develop until the town hits a population of around 20,000. Because we want to protect the downtown first. We don't want two downtowns. So I think that's very innovative. on our
Yeah.
part. It's just
It's just a
a
name for
term.
it.
I mean, it's a key piece of property, but we're gonna keep it in reserve.
And where is that?
The
That's the
brown
brown.
blob.
It's also kind of the last piece that gets put into the puzzle, like as we're building, you know, like as a keystone kind of is symbolic of the thing that holds the other two sides. And I know that you live on the west side, I live on the west side. That's kind of our keystone piece that holds us to the east side or like downtown.
I'll leave this up here if anybody wants to look at it.
And that's also
It's also-
online. If
yeah.
you follow
It's
the
on-
QR code, you can access that.
Yeah, you can access this laundry list I spoke to as well, and all
And
the
some other
ones.
things that aren't
Yeah.
even listed.
So this trail is already proposed. Okay. So,
We just haven't entered the design.
yeah, okay.
Mhm.
So I would probably be safe to say that there's probably gonna be some serious discussion after tonight. I mean, we've been talking about it. I mean, that's obvious. because we know, we saw what Zionsville did, and we saw what Yorktown did, so. But we didn't, you know, it only, it's some people got to demand it, we can.
Yeah, Mike.
Is there potential in that annexation that you're talking about, or that merge that you're talking about? Is there potential out there that people would fight it and create the donut hole we have here?
No, they would, if the township and the people in the town and the township agreed to merge, then they would automatically become part of the town too, because they're an unincorporated area. So they would be. Oh, I don't know. They've been calling me. Some of the people out here are like, we wish we would have joined you because nobody's plowing our streets. The
Right.
roads are in terrible shape. We could eventually have water problems.
Why did they choose not to join?
I wasn't here.
Neither was I. Marissa?
I'm in the yellow. I convinced 20 out of 21 neighbors, I think, to be annexed.
Are you glad you did?
They had, are you glad I did, is really the question. Really, at the time, our neighborhood, specifically that yellow part that extends out into the donut hole, they had fought annexation aggressively before the property tax caps went into effect in around 2000. I think those.
They're worried about the property taxes
At-
going up.
At the
that's why.
time, well, back when they fought it in 2007, 2008, before the property tax caps went into effect, I think in 2009 or 2010-ish.
Yeah.
And so there was a stigma associated with joining the town of property taxes being increased, even though most of those neighbors out there are being taxed at the 1% cap now. They just didn't really see the value in joining the town. From the perspective of the neighbors that did join, we wanted representation in our town government, that being key, that we identified very strongly with Pendleton as who we were a part of. So we wanted to have opportunities to serve in the town government. That was one thing. Also at the time, it was before the fire territory. So we were at the mercy of, we knew that Pendleton would show up, but in the case of an actual disaster, we were kind of at the mercy of who could get there. And at the time, I-69, the interchange was being reconstructed. And so you couldn't even hardly get to us from downtown Pendleton. And so that didn't make us feel super great. Also, police coverage, if there had been something that happened out there, the county would actually be the investigator of that situation. We didn't have representation for Pendleton Police Department. So those were the main things that we wanted when we were annexed. There were some other ticky-tacky things like streetlight maintenance and street maintenance, and we wanted trash service and a few things like that. But really for us, the argument that I used when I was advocating to be annexed into the town was, listen, we're going to go with somebody. We got to go with somebody. The county's not going to pay a ton of attention to us in this tiny little neighborhood. We need to go with Pendleton. And so that's why we did that back in 2018.
So electrical grid.
Yeah. Duke had already, or Pendleton had already acquired our power at that point too, which isn't a situation that would happen necessarily again now that that area has been set by the IURC.
Did that change our utilities? If we became part of Pendleton, we'd
No.
still have
No.
Anderson city utilities for our
Electric
electric.
wouldn't change. That's,
Okay.
the territories are set by the IURC.
Okay.
Water.
We have the opportunity
Yeah.
to come your way.
Right, but electric will always be Anderson.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, the growth is talked about to the north and to the west. Do you know of any that's to the east? Because I know there's quite a few farms, you know, that's
Yeah.
out there, and I just didn't know if you
So-
know of anything like that.
So
coming up.
could you go to the initial
The
boundary
township.
slide? So the growth will happen here first, just because this is closer to Indianapolis, and then it'll come up to our exit. You know, just like what you're seeing at exit 10, we all watch that develop. And then the next one is right here, the exit we basically share with Anderson at 222. Then the next one is 226. So as the growth comes up, right, I think what's going to happen is you're going to see it jump on 109 and come down like this. So it'll concentrate on 69, and then all of a sudden, maybe before this develops out here, it'll start to grow down this way, but also this is the sneaky little thing that's happening. Is Greenfield coming up 9. Hancock, think about it. You've got I-70 and you've got State Road 9 and 109 that connect 69 and 70. Those make it very valuable. So Markaville thinks that if Markaville thinks that they're immune for a while, I think they're wrong. Because I think it's going to go boom, 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 right like that. And come up here from the south. And come up this way too.
Why do you think it's gonna grow? Because our population's gonna drop a lot off in the next 10, 20 years, because nobody's having kids anymore.
Well, so
So,
good point.
like,
If you look
why
at the
you
whole
think
state, actually, I know about this. If you look at the whole state, every place in the state is draining people like crazy, except for guess what? The Indianapolis Metropolitan Statistical Area. Guess what? We're the next ring out in that growing metropolitan statistical area.
Because more people are just going to
They're
move
coming here.
into
They're
the
coming to the center of the
Indianapolis
state. They're
area.
coming
And they're
to-
gonna
That's
just
exactly.
start
So all those
settling further
people,
and further out.
yeah, the region up there by Chicago, don't pay attention to that, but every place else, it is dumping into the Indianapolis area. And so if you go back to, go look at the Fisher slide.
And that makes sense, because they're real close.
When I was a kid, it
I
was
know.
a liquor store,
But
you know?
I think part of it, though, you have to look at it, is job opportunities. I drive to Castleton right now, 3 days a week, you know, if not more, because of jobs. All of us, the big hospitals are out there. There's no, I mean, Community Anderson, that's where I used to work. And I left there about 3 years ago. It's only so big. Community Anderson is actually looking at buying property out towards 69 to build a whole new hospital, because we have nowhere to go on it. The infrastructure for Community Anderson, we can't build up. The property's not gonna be able to hold another 6th floor. We don't have very much further to go out, because we've already added the cancer center, we've added the 1601 building behind it. There's no place else to add buildings on their property, because it lives in the, what is that? The Country Club
Heights.
There's nowhere else to build it out. So they've actually looked at buying property out towards Nestle area to build. Like, they've talked about to us about where they could go to build a whole new hospital, and they would tear that one down potentially and start over. So that's where I'm saying people are moving to Indy because of the jobs, because the hospitals, you know, you've got to have healthcare, and these small towns don't have it.
I look at, you guys can go online and there's a GIS site and you can check the whole plat map in Madison County. Go in and start looking east of Pendleton, you're gonna find a lot of big plots that's owned by people out of Indy and even out of state. So people are already buying that property, anticipating this growth out 38, 36. Community owns 20 acres at the very northwest corner of those condominiums up here on 67, but that would actually fall in Anderson right now, I think, because of where the line is. But they own 20, they own 20, and I don't know how they'll get back there, because there's 2 other properties owned by different agencies and different entities in front of them. But there has to be a right of way back there somewhere.
You expect growth to come up and bounce off Anderson.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. I mean, I got to look, just look at what happened 2X's, 3X's before us. I mean,
What's your expectation?
It's like I said, Scott, go down Mount Comfort Road. We went down there 5 years ago, it would look like it does now. I mean, it's changed, there's so much built up.
yeah, my brother lives in Porterville, and knows where houses start. He loved living there, now he's like, doesn't like it.
Nothing else? Thank you.